Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers here, airing from the United States of America. Tonight's broadcast, folks, is specifically to address many of the problems and to reveal to the world what on earth is going on in Canada. As I explained the other night, I have, folks, I want to show you something. This is just overnight. Overnight, folks, from people all over this planet who are shocked, dismayed, upset, concerned about what's going on in Canada, because Canada is a free country. At least it was, like America, a free country. And apparently we may end up saying like it, at least it was, until such time we put a stop to it. But I want the people who have written and called, and people from a lot of countries around the world, to hear directly from one of your citizens. We put the appeal out just yesterday, and I've gotten hundreds of emails of people that want to come on our broadcast and talk to the people around the country here in the United States, especially as to what's exactly going on. You know, I used to wonder, how in the world could tyrants take control of an entire population? You know, you read about it when you're in high school, you study it when you're in college, you hear about it, you watch movies about it, you say, these things could never take place. Well, they are taking place. I have specifically invited a number of young people, college students, upper grade students in high schools, to watch tonight, because you're going to hear from a Canadian citizen tonight. You're going to hear from a Canadian citizen who I believe is a patriot, who has done everything he could and continues to do everything he could in order to fight the good fight of faith. So without me continuing, I'm going to now bring on Dave from the Shed. And he's with us tonight. And folks, we've had to improvise. We've had some technical difficulties, but I'm going to ask Dave to tell his story. This is what this is going to be about on either every Thursday night or every other Thursday night for the Canadian citizens who have been fighting for their freedom and liberty to tell their story. Now, Dave, can you hear me?
Yep, we got it all working now. Yep.
Oh, you can hear me through the computer?
No, through the phone still.
So. Okay. Well, this is our engineer. Dave, thank you for joining me tonight. You have a compelling story, and I'm just going to give the airtime to you. Remember who you're speaking to. I mean, hundreds of thousands. We had 250-something thousand people a few weeks ago who ended up viewing the broadcast. But just to give you a little bit of an idea of why you're on. People are heartbroken. They're worried, they're scared, they're upset, they feel alone. I want them to know they're not alone. I want them to know that we're standing with them, and I want them to know that there are men like you and women who are standing up for their freedom and liberty. So, Dave, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers, and especially thank you to all the American listeners out there. It's been such a privilege as a Canadian to be a part of this, and especially to see our flag being waved in your great country and in countries all over the world. It's truly, I can't even have words to describe it. I've been so full of emotion the last month or so that it's overwhelming. So I'll just, I'll tell you a bit of my story. So my name's Dave. I work in HVAC. From a small town in southern Ontario. And I heard about the convoy when it started back in BC, and I had been kind of loosely following it for a while. And then I happened to get off work early on the Thursday when the convoy was coming through southern Ontario. And I said, I should just go out to the overpass and see what's going on over there. So I drove out to the one of the overpasses over the highway, and half expecting that, hey, maybe I'll be the only one. But I went out there, and there was like several hundred people at the overpass, and there were people at the overpasses that I passed to get there, and flags and signs, and people had their Timmy's coffees out and passing them around. And it was clear to me that this was bigger than I could have ever hoped or imagined. And so I got out that first day. I waved some flags at the overpass in minus 20 Celsius, and I got frozen like everyone else. And then I said, I got to go to Ottawa. So I reached out to a friend of mine who's a truck driver, and there was 5 of us loaded into his pickup truck, and we all drove to Ottawa. And we got there on the Friday, and we ended up right downtown in the thick of things. And I just started doing what I do, which is connecting with people. And um, so it's quite a tale. But we ended up down there. There were tens of thousands of people. It was insane. It was like the biggest Canada Day festival you'd ever see, and people had barbecues and they were handing out food, and little kids were coming giving cards to the drivers, and there was people of all ages, all colors and creeds, and all coming together, waving their flags, and just celebrating together. And it was from the very beginning extremely overwhelming. And I said to myself, I can't go home yet. So I called my boss and I said, do you mind if I take a few weeks holiday? Well, at that point, I thought it might be a few days, but ended up being a bit longer. So I asked him if I could stay down here, and I did. And then, yeah, just my first one of the first people I met was a guy named Jay who owns the Shed Truck. If you guys watched any of the video coming out or the pictures coming out of Ottawa, you saw a truck right downtown in front of our Parliament buildings that had a shed built on the back of it. And I met the guy who owned that truck. I hopped in and started talking to him. And then we started having kind of a little gang of people who'd meet up at that shed. A few of the drivers in that area, we'd hang out in the shed, and it kind of became our base of operations. And then as the days progressed, and you got to understand that this was not organized. The media kept talking about these organizers, and as if we were reporting to someone. And everyone on the street, we kept trying to figure out who are these organizers, because no one's telling us what to do. Everyone was just coming together and taking care of each other. So most of the trucks that ended up in front of Parliament buildings were actually from Ontario. A lot of the Western trucks and the Quebec trucks and Eastern trucks, they got stuck at different parts outside of the city, because when we rolled into the city, police actually were the ones to stop the trucks. So a lot of people might not realize that, but it was actually the police who stopped the trucks in the first place. They were expecting maybe a weekend protest, so they stopped the trucks. And then at the end of the weekend, obviously, we didn't leave, but it was the police who initially kind of blocked us into the downtown. And everyone in the downtown, like me, had just kind of shown up, either in a truck or individually, and we didn't actually really know each other at all. And so I started running around and networking and trying to get to know each other, get drivers' numbers, make sure that they were taken care of. And eventually, I was asked to serve as what was called a street captain. So we had captains of different streets, and then of different blocks in those streets that would provide lines of communication for the drivers. So if the drivers needed something, they could reach out to one of their captains, and then we could communicate with those who were providing the fuel or the food, or had showers or lodging. And to be clear, it sounds a lot slicker than it was in reality. It was very chaotic and disorganized, but with everyone pulling their own weight, and no one was dragging us down. Every single person down there, small business owners, tradesmen, truck drivers, family people, they just all pulling together and giving everything they could.
So Dave,
So I served in that role as I need the headset if you're going to talk to me. I hear a bit of an echo, so I take it out. But did you have a question?
Yeah. And I'm going to give you all the airtime you want, because a lot of people are watching from around this planet, and you're very good at putting things in perspective. So I want to, you've set the scene great. I just want to emphasize the fact that it was peaceful. And what you just said was interesting. Moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, kids, and you use the word festive. And it seemed that way. No one would believe there was a protest going on, but it was a festive freedom type rally. And so I want people to understand that what they've been hearing on the news about violence, about some people in the protest causing violence, I just want them to hear it from you that you always get a few in a crowd that get out of hand, but for the most part, it was very a well-respected crowd, was it not?
Oh yeah, and just give me a wave when you're going to talk, because although the echo drives me crazy, so I pop these out. But yeah, it was. I'm glad that you and others caught on to what was really going on, because it was the most loving, joyful, patriotic thing that myself and anyone who was a part of would say. It was, yeah, festive is the best way to put it. It was like one big Canada Day festival. Families, I mean, it became kind of iconic. The bouncy castles, and there was road hockey tournaments, and so much joy, and yeah, it was extremely overwhelming with just how positive everything was. And I was actually surprised, because I wasn't surprised that, there might be a handful of odd ducks out there. Of course, in any crowd of tens of thousands, there's a couple ones. But what was more surprising is that how it was really just a handful, and we did not have any serious issues of any kind. There was no violence. There was no destruction of property. In fact, the exact opposite. When the snow started falling, there's all these little stories I could share. When the snow started falling, the city didn't want to come in there and take care of the snow because we were dangerous. So individuals just started using shovels that some of them happened to have in their trailers and started shoveling. This started to catch on, and then all of a sudden, people started dropping off more shovels for us, and eventually, we had shovels stationed all the way down the streets, so that anyone, when they saw the need, could grab a shovel and start shoveling the snow and clear the sidewalks. And the same thing happened with garbage. The city refused to pick up the garbage, so someone took it upon themselves. Actually, a friend of mine, he bought a bunch of garbage bags, and at his trailer, he's kind of had a stash of garbage bags, and everyone knew, here's where you can come get a garbage bag. And then we'd pile the garbage bags at an intersection, and there was a few individuals who took it upon themselves to get wagons, and they would carry the garbage bags in the wagons back and forth outside the red zone, so the city could pick it up effectively. And these are just small samplings of how this looked down there. People were doing their best to respect the city as much as possible. Honestly, the Wellington Street was cleaner and better taken care of after we left than before we arrived.
Now, Dave, the police. All right, I've gotten. I listen. It bothers me because I've been in law enforcement and in the military my entire life, but it bothers me to even talk about this. But it has to be spoken to because of the amount of mail I've gotten regarding the police actions. And I saw for myself on videos that the police. Some of them, not all of them. I want to believe that most of them worked within the framework of the ethics of the law, but you had a few that really roughed up some of the citizens there for no reason. We know about the horses that were used. I did show those videos to NYPD mounted police. They said these horses were not supposed to be used in that manner. So those officers who did that, I have no explanation other than they're either not trained or they just lost control. But what startled me at one point was a video I saw regarding Chris. I don't know if you saw Chris. I forgot his last name. He's a trucker who was stopped by the police. An officer approaches him, and he's talking to Chris. The officer's talking to Chris through the driver's side window. Now I'm watching this. Chris is as calm as you are. I mean, he's a guy that went to a festive event. It wasn't like he was going to go there to cause any trouble. So the cop and Chris are talking, and another cop gets in front of the truck and points a weapon at the windshield. And when Chris asked, why is the guy pointing the gun at me? The officer's response was, well, they're rubber bullets. Well, I showed that to some very well-trained professional law enforcement officers, and they were stunned. They said, number one, as a cop, you don't get in front of a vehicle. You just don't do that, because if it is a person who's bad, they're going to run you down. But you don't draw your weapon on an individual who's talking to another officer. So my question to you is this, and I got a lot of emails from people who said that they were really badly roughed up. Was there a lot of that went on? And if there was a lot, do you know of any actions that being taken now, whether it be an investigation or lawsuits?
Well, I think it might be useful to kind of finish my story and how I fit into all this, because
That's
this
fine.
ties in to the police action. So I was serving in the street, and then one of the things I did was set up some webcams on top of the shed. And so for security, because we were concerned, especially moving in later, the longer we were there, that there was going to be some significant police action, and we wanted to make sure it was filmed. And so we set up some webcams on top of the shed, and I started streaming it to YouTube, just because I thought people might be interested to see what's going on down here. And there'd been a lot of other streamers who had started filming as well. Some people say it might have been the most streamed event that has ever happened, and that's where this whole live from the shed was born. And so people can go onto YouTube and they can look up live from the shed on YouTube, and you can see the footage from the top of that shed. As well as we've carried it on, and now we've been doing some interviews and such. But some of the most interesting footage is of that day. I titled it "The Last Stand of the Shed." So if you go on there, you can actually watch. I was inside the shed broadcasting, so I was providing commentary to what was happening outside. It's quite chilling footage. You can watch the police. They start to move slowly at first, and then they come in hard and fast, hitting people with batons. And I actually watched one of our drivers get thrown to the ground and kneed like 4 or 5 times. That video got passed around quite a bit, so you might have seen the driver on the ground getting kneed repeatedly. And I was watching this all happen from within the shed, and then I just kind of sat beside my computer waiting for the inevitable. And the first thing I saw was the barrel of a gun, and this individual dressed in army type gear came in and arrested me. And you can listen to the audio of that from on live from the shed on YouTube. And so in response to the police behavior, you're totally correct that it was, and I see some people commenting and criticizing your use of just a few. I would agree that it was just a few. I've never had an issue with police before this, and during those 3 weeks, we did not have issues with police, and I think that's important to communicate. Many of the police were on our side. I think it's valuable to actually share a story. I was doing a lot of fuel delivery, especially initially, because that was one of the big logistical things we were trying to figure out. And there was one intersection that worked really nicely for transporting fuel in and out. And there was an officer who, when basically tried to get in with the fuel, this officer did not react at all when we walked by with fuel. And then I went over and chatted with him too, and without saying it directly, he was quite friendly to what we were doing, and he said, "You're welcome to walk past." He didn't say bring fuel. He said, "You can walk past here as much as you want." That's what he said to me. And so for several days while he was on duty there, we were passing fuel along that route. And actually at one point, a different police officer came. It's a special moment in my mind. And there was another police officer came over and blocked off our truck that was delivering fuel. And I watched this officer go over and talk to that officer, and then the second police left, and then the guy who'd been manning that intersection for the last few days, he just turned to me and gave me a little knowing nod, and we carried on our way and kept delivering the fuel. And there's many stories like this. The police were certainly not, you can't paint them with a broad brush. The vast majority of them were very professional, and we're very friendly. There's plenty of video going around of people even hugging the cops. And at one point, we were chanting like "We love you" to the police. And I know from staring into these guys' eyes that many of these men and women did not want to do what they were being forced to do. And I would agree that the majority of them did treat us professionally, and even in that final raid. But there was, unfortunately, a minority, and a minority with that amount of power can do a lot of damage, because we were surrendering. The individual I said who got kneed there, he was just on the ground surrendering, and then they ripped him to the floor and started kneeing him repeatedly. So a handful of people with all this power can do a lot of damage, even though I would say it wasn't certainly all the cops. And it's also worth noting that most of our local police were not there at that point. They had to bring in police from all over the country, from British Columbia, from other provinces. So it took them 3 weeks basically to find enough people who were actually willing to do what they ended up doing. So although there was issue with how some of the cops behaved, I don't at all want to paint our police force with a negative brush.
Well, that's good to know, and people need to know that it wasn't the majority of officers; it was certainly the minority. But they did do damage, I must tell you, and that's what troubles me. The whole world was watching, the whole world. I've always had respect for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the police in Canada. I still do. As a fellow officer, I respect them. But what I want to see, and I hope we see this, is that those officers who used excessive force are going to be dealt with. Now, look, I believe in using tough, strong force when you have people like they have in our country burning down cities and occupying streets and committing acts of violence and on and on and on. But it just is astonishing to me. And how, especially in Canada, I mean, the most peaceful nation on earth, the most respectable people on earth, when the police went in there and roughed up citizens the way they did. But that's something that needs to be investigated, and I suppose a conversation for the other day. Now I got to ask you a question, and you may not have the answer to this as a follow-up of what you're saying regarding the police. There was an acting police chief, I think the last name is Bell, I could be wrong, who apparently, and I believe I heard him right, I could be wrong, but he was having a press conference, Dave, and he said, even those who left, we don't know who you are, or we didn't get you now, but we know who you are. We're going to come knocking on your door. We're going to come get you. We're going to charge you. Now, I heard this guy say,
"We will hunt you down" is actually the phraseology he used.
Yeah. So my point is this: is that actually going on, or do you have any knowledge? Did he actually say that? Because I don't know the guy, and I'm not going to say that he's a bad man. I don't know, but for a police chief to suggest that they're going to come and get people in their homes and arrest them for doing what? And a lot of people emailed me about that, so I'm going to ask you that question. You know anything about
it? There's some very disturbing things have certainly come out of his mouth and from his leadership. And to see some people commenting too, I'm being too soft on the police. Obviously, it goes without saying, I had major concern with how people were treated, by myself included, by some of the police. I simply didn't want to act like our movement is anti-police at all, because it's not. But there was certainly some, and I personally have submitted my footage along with others through my Live from the Shed YouTube channel. I've been collecting footage from other streamers as well, passing it along to there are some citizens investigation groups that look into police action that I've submitted it to. I've passed my footage along to various journalists and to lawyers. Several of the individuals are pursuing litigation, and so definitely these things will be followed up. As far as to Bell, it's important to know. Wouldn't even have to criticize him if you knew the background. You can imagine what I think of him. So there was one police chief. He resigned. They brought in another police chief. He lasted for 2 days, and then he resigned. And then they brought in the third guy, and he's the one who did this force. So I think it's quite clear that both of those previous two police chiefs were not comfortable with the direction it was going. And so they brought in this third guy who seems disturbingly happy, enjoying watching people suffer. And the things that he spoke about of "we'll hunt you down, even if you left." And it's like, that's a good way to get protesters just to leave, telling them, even if they leave, we're going to hunt you down. Like, what a disturbingly horrible thing. As to what really happened, some of it was flair, but during those emergency orders, it got very dark and very scary very quickly. Some of my friends who are also YouTubers that I met while I was doing this Live from the Shed thing, they had police show up at their door and tell them to take down their footage. Now, I don't know if any consequences would have actually come from them leaving their footage, but we are peaceful, friendly Canadians who are generally compliant with the police. And when the police come knocking, you assume they must have the authority to do something. And that's what's scary too, is this abuse of that authority. But so during the emergency orders, I do know that some people were told to take footage down. There were bank accounts were seized. Friends of mine had their bank accounts seized. It was getting very dark and very scary very quickly. And those emergency powers, I think our government was enjoying them a little too much. So I'm very thankful that those have been dropped. I mean, there's footage on my channel of one day during the emergency orders. I went out for a walk and a little flag, and my little after. Well, I'd been arrested, and I wasn't charged, but I was arrested. And then when I got out, then the next day I went for a little walk, and I went waving my flag, and I had about 6 officers come over, threatened to arrest me again, and they escorted me out of the downtown for the crime of being out with a flag.
Chris, I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
With regard to the police action, I tell you what we're going to do, and whether we succeed or not, I don't know, but we're going to do something about that. You have videos, etc., and we have a lot of emails, but the videos tell the story. We're going to send a letter to the International Association of Police Chiefs. I know some people in that organization. They're very good. They're professionals. They protect the integrity of the offices they hold. I'm going to ask them to investigate this. Whether they do or not, I don't know. I'm hoping that at the very least, they'll begin to ask questions to protect their own professional perspective, because like I said before, it troubles me that the police were used by the government because that's what's done in China. It's done in communist countries. I would expect police chiefs, and maybe they can't do it in Canada, but we've had sheriffs here and police chiefs stand up against the government and say, look, we're not going to go that far. We're not going to do this. And then the government officials back down because the laws in this country are very, very stringent on the use of excessive force. Now, I don't know about many of the laws in your country. Obviously, we have a constitution. You have a charter of rights. Is that what they call it?
Yeah. I'm not the best person to get into the details on that. But I could go with the common sense thing that in a nation like ours, when this was purely a political matter at this point. Clearly, this was an uprising of the people, peacefully making a statement against the current government, and it was an issue of politics, and it wasn't an issue of safety. And there was no justification for bringing in a emergency measures act and sending in the troops after.
Now, Dave, your screen froze, but I'm sure we could still hear you. At least I hope we can. Okay, all right. Okay, now, the screen is frozen, but I got you on the phone here, so we can still hear you. So can you hear me?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, so here's as we close, get close to closing the broadcast, a couple of issues. One, boy, I lost my train of thought. Like I said, what I plan to do, we'll get in touch with the International Associations of Police Chiefs. Maybe you could teach me something here about the process of government in Canada. In our country, we've started what we call the red wave, the red tsunami, meaning the Republican Party here has become so strong and emboldened that the Democrats are running with the tail between their legs because they know that they're going to be done come November. In your country, is there a time, because people are asking, what can we do? What can we do? And we've put together grassroots, and you and I talked the word grassroots earlier. Grassroots Americans have come together by the millions, and from school boards all the way up to the White House, we're going to remove the Democrats, just throw them out of office. So in Canada, is that being done? Because what you're doing now, you're rallying people to do things within the framework of the law. And I've emphasized that, and you really demonstrated tonight and articulated very well that you guys are doing things within the framework of the law. And for foreign countries, people in foreign countries, a lot of them are watching tonight, are looking at the way you guys have handled yourselves as a way they could handle themselves. But what's the end game, or at least the beginning of the end game in your view?
Well, I mean, this whole thing started with the mandate against the truckers, but obviously grew much beyond that. There's a unifying feeling amongst everyone who was down there that although there's different, extremes and different views, but when it came into this cause lose their jobs, to separate families, to deny them access to public spaces because of their personal private health choices. That's very scary stuff. You're a very basic human rights issue, and I thought we learned our lesson on this a long time ago. We've been through this society before when we start to segregate into who's in and who's out, who's clean, who's unclean. This is a tale as old as time, and for us to be going down this path again is truly shocking. So there needs to be clear assurance. Like, this will not end. I can tell you of what's going on around Canada. There's still plenty going on of rallies every weekend, convoys. The international media isn't covering it quite as much, but there's probably more people out there doing things now than there ever was in Ottawa, because it's sparked across the country. And it's not going to end until not only all of these mandates are gone, but beyond that, like, clear assurances that our government can never behave like that ever again. Whatever law allowed them to make these mandates, or whatever emergency powers, whatever it was, those need to be rewritten, and this needs to change. So, I mean, we're mostly, a lot of people involved, like, we're not involved in politics ever before, but I am excited to see of how many people are now engaged with politics, and it's going to be really interesting in the next election. You may know that the leader of the Conservatives was pushed out as part of this process. He was against the truckers, and that basically sealed his fate as being pushed out of the party. So I'm quite hopeful that the new Conservative leader will actually be a Conservative, which I'm looking forward to, because our last one was not. And so I do hope that there'll be a leveling out. But this, to me, this isn't entirely left versus right. Again, for all of Western civilization, there's been a balancing of the left and the right, and there's a place for both. But I think the left has shifted, as you would probably agree, very, very extreme, and some on the right have gone into dangerous directions too. And it's time for that reasonably minded people on both sides of the political spectrum that understand the need for basic human rights and freedoms, even if they disagree on some government programming and funding and how that all works. But you should not lose your job. You should not be denied access to your child's hockey game. You should not be splitting up families and having people die alone in nursing homes because of this power. No government should have that kind of power. And these protests in Canada will not end until there's clear assurance that that's never going to happen again.
Well, Dave, as we wrap up, ironically, whether it be a Joe Biden or a Justin Trudeau, they gave birth to the very fears they have. Because of their actions, they've emboldened good, peace-loving people, not only in their countries, but around the world, to hit back. Let me add this, that we're on a mission here, Campaign for America. We took up Ronald Reagan's playbook, and we're going to fight communism. This is what I believe a lot of it has to do with. The influence of Marx, Lenin, and Stalin have come into our schools, have come into our workplaces, have come into our governments, and we're going to fight, we're going to fight, we're going to fight. And make no mistake about it, we're going to win. We always win. We always do. The good always rises. We win because of people like you, Dave, because of the people who stood strong and tough. So very proud of you. So before you leave, Dave, and then I got a few words with the audience, you have anything to say before you leave tonight's broadcast?
Well, the big message I want to communicate, I'm not a trucker myself. The truckers, they took this stand. They lit this torch. They started this fire, and regular people like me took that on. And I encourage all the listeners out there too. You don't have to wait for some organization to start something. You don't have to join a club. Get out there, wave your flag, host a barbecue, have a concert, get a few people around, and go for a little convoy. Like it's the regular people, it's the everyday individuals that have really turned this into what it is. So we're so grateful for the sacrifice and the leadership that the truckers showed us, and now it's the duty of every free-loving man, woman, and child to take a stand in their own communities.
Dave, I salute you. God bless you. Thanks for joining me, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have. What can I say? The guy is articulate. He presented his case to the entire world, of those around other countries who are watching, and what a credit to his nation. What a credit to humanity. I really want to touch upon something before we sign off. I know we're a little over because it's something that needs to be said, and I'm one who is. As I've told you, I'm not a preacher. I'm involved in politics. I'm involved in government, but I've got to address something. The thousands of emails and messages we're getting are from a lot of people hurting, alone, frightened for their children and grandchildren. They feel nobody's standing with them. So tonight I'm asking those of you, not only in Canada, but in America, reach out for your clergymen. Reach out for those who are giving sermons in churches and ministering to people wherever their house or worship is. Reach out to them. Ask them to come together and to start speaking to these issues that people need addressed. And I'm talking about a spiritual issue as well as a political issue. Look, I've for years, I've noticed that the farther away from America, the farther away America walked away from God and the principles of which this nation was founded upon, the worse things got. Somewhere in the conversation, these politicians have to wake up and realize that it's not only a political battle, but it's a spiritual battle. Evil, hate, I see it. It's just so disturbing to me. And even I stay up at night figuring out, and I pray about these things. Well, what can I do? What part can I do to put an end, at least to some degree, minimize the hatred in the hearts of people? And I was led to thinking about, well, where do you get the water, right, to put the fire out? Well, it's called living water, and it's in the Bible. I'd say that maybe 98% of us have Bibles in our homes. And I was asked years ago by a pastor, well, we all have Bibles. Steve Rogers, when was the last time you opened it up? And at that time, I never opened it. And I do now every day. So I'm encouraging folks to understand one thing. You're not alone. Not alone at all. When I read the letters from grandparents, I've received letters, folks, from people in their 90s in Canada and the United States who are frightened. They don't want to die knowing that their country is going to hell in a handbasket. They don't want to die leaving their children and grandchildren behind, maybe with shackles on them. These are the words people have used in their letters. So my point is that there's a God above. All right. We can't solve all our own problems, but God can. He could give us peace. He could give us grace. And I would encourage you to go to your local church. I don't care if you didn't walk in a church for your whole life. Maybe it's time to walk in and sit down with a minister, a member of the clergy. In addition to that, those of you who are clergymen and clergywomen, please come together. Send a strong letter. I know a whole group of the clergy people in Canada did that. Send a strong letter, no holds barred, to the people in government. They need to hear from you. This is the time. This is the time. I have the slogan for Campaign for America. Now is our time. Now is our time to rise up in a peaceful way, in a strategic way, in a tactful way, where we can really make change. But saying that, we got to be able to address what's in the human heart more than anything else. So think about what I've shared with you tonight. What Dave shared, now we have it cataloged, right? Now it's on video. People have heard directly in a very articulate way from an individual who lives in Canada, who was there, and who had told his story. Now, if you want to tell your story, email us, folks. Go to our website. I'll tell you, this is the best way to do it. I'm so overwhelmed with emails. I'm buried in them. But if you go to our website, campaign4america.com. There's a navigation bar. Go where it says contact. Put your name and phone number in there. This will make things easy for us. And just put down you'd like to be a guest on the broadcast. Somebody will call you and we'll talk. We've got people booked up for the next couple of weeks, but still give us a call. Sometimes people cancel. I want to give the Canadian people every chance to tell their story, a story that hasn't been told. With regard to America, we're going to be addressing the issues that we're facing here in America on Monday nights. And boy, are we over our heads, folks. I can't begin to tell you what's going on in our country with regard to the devastation that Joe Biden has brought to the doorsteps of every American. But we are a good country. We are a good people. We are a generous people. We are a strong people. And we're going to fight for freedom and liberty until our last breath. You know, that's our history. So to my American countrymen, stay strong, stay tough. We're going to get through this. We got through many crises, many challenges. nobody's going to keep any of us in the valley, because every time I see a mountain, and I know every time an American patriot, a Canadian patriot, or any freedom-loving person sees a mountain, we look at it and say, you know what? We're going to climb that mountain. And when we get to the top, we're going to raise our hands to the Lord, thank him that we got there. And we're going to say, you see that next mountain, the taller one? We're going for that one. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Please share this video wide and far. People are, by the tens of thousands, have been watching these testimonies. Well, tonight I want to thank again Dave, his family, and God bless all of you in Canada who are standing strong. God bless the American truck drivers who are still in Washington. I haven't said much about that, but we're going to talk a little bit more about that on Monday night. We're so preoccupied with this war that Joe Biden dragged us into, and we're going to be able to come through this. We certainly are. Thank you. God bless you. God bless you all. And you know what, folks? At the end of the day, think about this. History tells us we win and they lose. Have a great evening.